Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorosh. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold after 3 super fun games in LA, actually 2.5 of them. The start of the Major League season, the exit from Lakeland, lots of interesting things to go on. Totally different baseball. We got lots of things to talk about. But first, time for the baby update. So let's get into week review. Give us the baby update.
Yeah, I'm expecting to become a father later this week. So that's pretty exciting. We are on the doorstep of 37 weeks, and that's been exactly what the doctors have been aiming for. So for that, Savannah and I feel very blessed to be able to get to 37 weeks and really looking forward to, this new step in this new chapter in our lives. Also, want to say another shout out to Detroit Free Press columnist Jeff Seidel for stepping up with the daily coverage of the team. I mean, Jeff is a top 10 sports columnist in the country, and for him to be willing to take over as, the daily beat writer, if you will, while I've been gone, and he did that in spring training. He's now out in LA and Seattle with the Tigers. For him to be willing to take over that role, it tells you everything you need to know about Jeff. And then as for me, only a few more days until I become a dad, so I can't wait to share an update next week. Hopefully it'll all be good news. Hopefully everything goes well, but Savannah and I are both very excited. As for the Detroit Tigers, which is why everyone clicked on this podcast to start, the Tigers, they began the 2025 season on Thursday against the Los Angeles Dodgers at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. Tigers lost all 3 games, but the gritty, never quit culture that's been instilled by manager AJ Hinch, it's the same now as it was at the end of last season, which is really encouraging. Like, the culture is still there. That's a really big deal because there's this culture that's rooted in winning today's game at all costs. And that is what sets the Tigers apart from a lot of other teams, even if they don't have the same superstar power as some of the other teams. So as for the games, the Tigers lost 5-4 on Thursday, 8-5 on Friday, and 7-3 on Saturday. The 2 key stats of the series for me, the Dodgers hit 3 home runs in each game for a total of 9 home runs, and the Tigers went 4 for 32 with runners in scoring position. But here's all that really matters. It's an 0-3 record for the Tigers to start the 2025 season. Some of the individual games, some of the takeaways. Thursday's opening day game, you had reigning Cy Young winner Tarik Skubal on the mound. He allowed 4 runs on 6 hits and 1 walk, with 2 strikeouts in 5 innings. He had just 1 start with 2 or fewer strikeouts in his previous 47 outings. And then it was just 2 strikeouts against the Dodgers this time around. He did not look like the Cy Young version of Tarik Skubal. The pitch execution wasn't as crisp as it needed to be, and the Dodgers made him pay. The Tigers, though, they had a chance. They had a chance to win with 2 runners on in the 9th inning, but Trey Sweeney struck out swinging and Colt Keith popped out. They stranded the runners, and it was a 1-run loss. In Friday's game, Jack Flaherty faced his old team. He looked good early on, but then he kind of lost it as the outing went along. He ended up allowing 2 runs on 3 hits and 2 walks with 5 strikeouts across 5 2/3 innings. The Tigers and Dodgers went to extra innings. There was the controversial play at the plate in the top of the 9th when Manuel Margot was tagged out. Initially, he was ruled safe. After replay, he was ruled out. I've seen all the angles on social media, at least the ones that have been sent my way. I think he was out, but it's clearly up for debate. I completely understand how some other people could see it, the other way. Regardless, the Tigers had a 5-3 lead in the top of the 10th inning. So they were up 5-3 in the top of the 10th, and then they lost 8-5 after giving up 5 runs in the bottom of the 10th inning, capped by a walk-off 3-run home run from Mookie Betts off Bo Brisky. And then Saturday's game, the series finale, I don't really have a whole lot to say. Reese Olson started. He allowed 4 runs on 4 hits and 2 walks with 5 strikeouts across 4 2/3 innings. He was fine, just like Skubal and Flaherty were fine. After that, the Dodgers scored runs off Brant Herter and Kenta Maeda, and they kind of ran away with the series finale. But those are the 3 games in Los Angeles. The other big note from the 3-game series was the Gleyber Torres injury. That's one thing to watch for this upcoming week. Gleyber Torres, who was removed from Friday's game with a right rib cage discomfort. He'd been dealing with it in the past, and at least for a few days, trying to play through it. And then it got worse after he turned on an inside pitch from Yoshinobu Yamamoto for his first home run of the 2025 season. And it felt really uncomfortable after that. He ended up leaving that game on Friday, and then he didn't play in Saturday's series finale. So we're going to monitor that closely. Gleyber Torres seems optimistic that he won't need a stint on the injured list, but we won't know more about his status until before Monday's series opener against the Seattle Mariners. But that's the week in review. Baby Petzold is coming this week. Gleyber Torres has a ribcage issue, and the Tigers are 0-3 to start the season, despite playing a healthy, competitive, gritty brand of baseball.
Fun 3 days just to get the baseball season started. If you haven't understood why Evan and I for 4 weeks have tried to explain, maybe 5 weeks, don't get too involved in what's you're seeing in spring training, because it often and almost always has nothing to do with how they play Major League Baseball. Once the season starts, well, if you didn't understand that after this weekend, then I can't help you. Trying to navigate Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman 4 times a game, well, you just don't see that in spring training. You don't see guys hitting changeups 4 inches below the bottom rail of the strike zone into the stands for a 3-run homer. You don't see a lot of stuff. And it's just totally different caliber of baseball. The Tigers played gritty as hell for the first 2 games. Game 3, a lot of lost opportunity. Game got away from them. They had the human victory cigar, half the pitch the last 2 innings. And, this is early spring baseball. We're going to have Bobby Scales on later. We're going to try to talk to him a lot, because you just need to understand it takes 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days for everybody to start getting into a routine. And, guys are going to miss pitches. Guys, we threw more pitches down the middle. We're hit out of the park for home runs in a series than we may throw in a series all year. That may be Tarek Skubal's worst start all year. 162 games is a long time. I thought fans were just way, way too upset with what was going on. That's why they call them fans. I kind of liked how the Tigers played for, the first 24 innings of the series. And, the culture, the mojo, what transpired in the last 50 games, there was a lot of similarities, even though the players were not the same. So, all right, let's jump into question 1 of the big 2. Let's get right to it. What were your takeaways from the Tigers versus Dodgers series, Ev? I just kind of gave you mine.
No, I'm going to step away from, kind of what happened in the games and talk more about the culture. And I know you kind of just referenced that, but we really do need to keep talking about that, because what we're seeing is really special. And we'll get to Spencer Torkelson. Don't worry. But yeah, aside from Spencer Torkelson, my biggest takeaway is just that the 2025 Tigers are the same as the 2024 Tigers in all the best ways. Like no Parker Meadows, no Matt Vierling, no Wenzel Perez. Those injuries aren't dragging this team down. I keep going back to before the 2022 season when Al Avila was still the general manager. That offseason, the Tigers traded for Tucker Barnhart, signed Javier Baez, signed Eduardo Rodriguez, traded for Austin Meadows. We were ready for Casey Mize, Tarek Skubal, and Matt Manning to take that next big step as big leaguers. We were ready for Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green to make their MLB debuts. The excitement was so high in spring training that it almost felt too good to be true. And then Riley Green, he gets hurt in spring training. That sucks the air out of the room. And then everything just crashes and burns. And that was just a miserable season. But it was almost like, all that excitement was built on sand rather than a firm foundation. And by that, I mean, there was no real culture, or at least that culture hadn't been fully cultivated yet. Fast forward to 2025. So go from 2022 to 2025. It's the 5th year of manager AJ Hinch, the 3rd year of president of baseball operations Scott Harris. Back in spring training, everything the Tigers did, it was very businesslike. It did not feel like an exciting spring training. It just seemed steady. That's the players, the coaches, the front office. There wasn't a lot of excitement day to day in camp. It was just like, here we are, we're showing up, we know what the expectations are, and we're going to meet those expectations. And we're going to get better every single day to make sure that we get where we want to be at the end of the season. It was just, that was the way they went about it. There was not emotional roller coasters that they were riding. And so I think that's an example of how the culture is different now than it was a few years ago. Like, this team is not going to let some injuries knock them down. Not like they did a few years ago when Riley Green went down in spring training. This team is not going to ride the roller coaster of all the expectations, not like they did a few years ago when they got Javi Baez and Eduardo Rodriguez and we're supposed to take a really big step. Like, does that all make sense? Like, the 2025 Tigers are exactly like the 2024 Tigers. And I'm talking about the 2024 Tigers that went on a 31-11 run to the postseason last year. And the 2024 Tigers that felt like they could beat anyone. and the 2024 Tigers that played all 27 outs, and the 2024 Tigers that were gritty. And that's exactly what the 2025 Tigers showed us in these first 3 games of the new season. Like in Thursday's game, the Tigers cut the Dodgers lead to 5-4 with the sacrifice fly in the 8th inning, and they were 1 9th inning hit away from winning the game. In Friday's game, Tigers tied the game in the 9th inning, and they would have taken the lead if not for a reverse call. Then they took a 5-3 lead in the 10th inning. So they were a reverse call away from winning the game, and they were in position to win it in the top of the 10th anyway. And then in Saturday's game, the Tigers looked like they just wanted to move on to the next series, but they still made it a 5-3 deficit by scoring in the 7th inning. And then the Dodgers eventually put the nail in the coffin, but the Tigers kept it interesting and showed some fight there, even in a series finale that got away from him. So my biggest takeaway is that the culture we saw in 2024 has translated to 2025. And I think that's the perfect example of the organizational culture that manager AJ Hinch has developed here. I have a lot of confidence that the Tigers are going to continue to be a tough team to beat day in and day out, regardless of what the roster looks like. And that's going to be huge for this team. And it could make the difference in whether or not they return to the playoffs. So I think the 2025 Tigers are much more than their 0-3 record, all because of the culture.
Look, you have some winning teams in town right now. You had the Detroit Lions, and a lot of the Lions' success, besides phenomenal drafting, has been, in a few good trades, has been all about coaching and culture. The Detroit Pistons, winners of 14 basketball games in 2024, all about culture. And it's, now in their style of play. The 2024 Detroit Tigers, last 50 games of the season, all about culture and ability to execute a style of play. Not to say that there wasn't some talent, but there's not nearly as much talent as people think. It's the productivity of the talent. It's the execution of the strategy.
It's the sum of the parts.
Correct. And what we saw in this first series reminded me, and I know reminded you, much of how they ended 2024. Now, we'll reconvene this discussion next Monday or Sunday, and 2 Sundays from now and 3 Sundays from now, and see if that's still the case. I think it probably will be. But that's really the biggest takeaway you get from this first series, aside from the fact they played a team with 3 Hall of Famers, and every time a pitcher made a mistake in the middle of the plate, it landed in the stands. It wasn't a line drive to the third baseman. It wasn't, a single to left. It was a home run. And you're going to have a series like that. But at the end of the day, pretty happy with what transpired. I mean, heck, they had a 12.3% walk rate for the series. They had a 710 OPS. They had a 104 WRC plus, which was season that's seemingly going to be the benefactor of a pretty juiced up baseball, was still 8th in baseball for the first series. It's not like the Dodgers don't have an outstanding pitching staff. They do. So the Tigers were fine. All right, let's move on to question 2 of the big 2. Is the start of Spencer Torkelson for real? Is this going to be a special season for Spencer Torkelson? Thoughts, Ev?
Spencer Torkelson it's amazing. I mean, what's going on is just incredible. He is hitting .444, that is 4 for 9, with 1 home run, 5 walks, and 4 strikeouts in 14 plate appearances in his first 3 games of the 2025 regular season. He also hit .340 with 5 home runs, 4 walks, and 11 strikeouts in 55 plate appearances in 19 games in 2025 spring training. Let's combine spring training and the regular season. We have a nice sample of 69 plate appearances. He is hitting .356 with 6 home runs, a 13% walk rate, and a 21.7% strikeout rate in 22 games. Spencer Torkelson has been raking since the beginning of spring training, and he is showing no signs of slowing down. Now, I came on this podcast last week, and I talked about how I would have picked Justyn-Henry Malloy over Spencer Torkelson for the final spot on the roster. Yes, that was before the Wenzel Perez injury. And I had a few valid reasons for that. I'll be the first to say I counted out Spencer Torkelson. And I'll be the first to say I might have been wrong here, because what he's doing, it seems real. He's hitting the ball extremely hard, average exit velocity of 101.4 miles an hour on 5 batted balls. Small sample? Sure. But his average exit velocity was 93 miles an hour in spring training. To put that in perspective, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was at 93.8 miles an hour last season. Yordan Alvarez was at 93.1 miles an hour last season. So Spencer Torkelson in spring training was hitting the ball like Vlad Jr. and Jordan last season in terms of average exit velocity. Like, that's how Spencer Torkelson has been hitting the ball. Meanwhile, he's rarely chasing pitches out of the strike zone, so that's huge. He isn't swinging and missing, so when he does swing, he's making contact. Those are all great things. And then you look even beyond the results. There's so much to like about what he's doing at the plate. He has refined both his stance at the plate and his approach at the plate. He still has that same swing, but his stance is more athletic in the box rather than a statue. And as a result of that, he's able to cover more of the strike zone. In the past, pitchers would pitch to locations where his bat path couldn't reach because he was just standing up straight in the batter's box like a statue. And when he swung, his bat path could only cover a certain part of the strike zone. So they were able to pitch around that. And that's how opponents attacked him. And that's why he struggled as much as he did, right? He used to be able to only hit pitches in one part of the strike zone because he was this robotic statue. Now he can hit all types of pitches in all areas of the strike zone because he's more athletic in the box. That's huge. Next up, you have his approach at the plate. He's been focused on hitting line drives over the second baseman's head, which is something the Tigers have wanted him to do since the end of his 31 homer season in 2023. The Tigers have been talking about that for a while now. Spencer Torkelson now is bought in. Last year, however, Spencer Torkelson was focused on pulling the ball to left field in hopes of hitting 40 plus home runs. Like, that's what he wanted to do. That's all he cared about, was pulling pitches. All he wanted to do was hit home runs. Now he could care less about pulling pitches to left field. He could care less about hitting home runs. He just wants to hit line drives over the second baseman's head. So that's into the right center gap. And if his swing is late, he'll drive the ball to right field. If his swing is early, he'll pull the ball to left field. He has a completely refined approach at the plate, which is allowing him to be a hitter, not just a slugger. I'm talking about being a hitter, which is what the Tigers have wanted for him since he hit 31 home runs. They've wanted him to be a hitter first and then let the power come naturally because he can do damage. He has damage in his toolbox. So be a hitter first. Let that power come out naturally. That's exactly what we're seeing now. Spencer Torkelson is being a hitter first and then allowing that power to come naturally. That's been Spencer Torkelson for the past 6 weeks, dating back to the beginning of spring training. We have 26 weeks remaining in the regular season. We'll see if he can keep it up, but all signs are pointing in the right direction for Torque.
Here's what I got to say. As a student of hitting, good news about Spencer Torkelson, if history is any indicator of the future. 3 seasons, he just didn't look comfortable at the plate, was never on time. Occasionally, have a good day, have a good 2 days, maybe have a good week, but consistency-wise, a real struggle. 2023, even though he struggled quite a bit from a production standpoint in 2023 in the first 2 months of the year, he was hitting the ball hard. He was on time. And eventually, good swings, resulted in production. What I see from him now is much of what I saw in 2023, except I've seen an evolution. It's like the difference between a senior in high school and a junior in college. Way more mature approach, way more repeatable. And the good news is, typically, what we've seen from Spencer Torkelson in his time in Detroit, once he is able to get locked in with his swing, he's able to maintain being locked in some form for pretty long periods of time. What I am really looking forward to is talking to Bobby Scales about this. Bobby's got thousands of at-bats in professional baseball, and I think he can explain how minute the difference is between being late and being on time and the small, subtle things that you can do to change that. I can't speak to why he was not able to do it last year, but all I care about is he is doing it now. I think it should be very interesting now that he's hitting to how they're going to manage creating a lineup, because obviously Spencer Torkelson, as of right now, needs to be in the lineup every day, whether it's at first base or at DH, and he's going to get a lot of at-bats as time goes on and people get healthy. And, I think I said last week, Jay-Hen's going to get 400 at-bats in the major leagues this year. So that should be interesting how they're going to navigate that. And at some point in time, Meadows and Vierlinger come back. And that's even more that they're going to have to navigate from a lineup standpoint. But as far as Spencer Torkelson goes, holy smokes, looks great, looks repeatable. Really have a lot of respect for how the approach has matured, and tip of the cap, baby. I've said this a million times. If you hit, you play.
Can I ask you a question, Mark, too? Because if you go back to his 2023 season and what he did in his final 83 games, Spencer Torkelson, his final 83 games in 2023, he hit 246 with 23 home runs in 83 games. And if you put that out to a 162 game season, that's 45 home runs. Like, is that something that we can expect from Spencer Torkelson if he's really locked in at the plate? Like, we're seeing him as more of a hitter than we've ever seen him before, and the power is still there. And when you consider what he did in his final 83 games in 2023, it was 162 game pace of 45 home runs. Can we start talking about Spencer Torkelson if everything stays locked in? Is he that kind of a threat actually? Do you think at the plate where he could be a guy? And this is everything that we've ever wanted and everything that the Tigers have wanted. This is why after 2023, the Tigers still said, hey, you need to start hitting the ball over the second baseman's head because you need to become more of a hitter. You can't just be a power guy. You need to be able to also hit for contact. But can Spencer Torkelson be a 250 hitter with 40 home runs, or am I getting way too far ahead of myself right now? I know last week I said I would have taken J-Hen over him, so I get it. But at the same time, what we're seeing, and you contextualize it with what he's doing with the hard contact that he's making compared to Vlad Jr. and Yordan Alvarez, and he's drawing walks, he's swinging at the right pitches. He looks different in the batter's box. I don't know, is that too unrealistic to think that that's possible?
Yes. It's too unrealistic to think he's going to hit 40 homers. Now, with this particular approach, could I see him hit 30 to 35 homers, hit 265 with a 370 on base percentage with the way he's taking pitches, even a 360 OBP and, between a 450 and a 500 slug, and all of a sudden you're getting close to an 800 OPS? Yeah, that's possible. I look at it in a more global way than that. I don't just need home runs. I would much rather have him become a more accomplished, more difficult out at the plate and more well-rounded hitter using more pieces of the field. That's a sustainable type of approach. And that's really what I would be looking for from him in what we've seen. At the same time, here's all I got to say. It's been, spring training, and it's been 3 games. This is something we're going to check back on at least for the next few weeks, see if he can maintain being on time. If he's on time, he's going to really be productive. So excited to see what happens. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we are joined by what we like to refer to as the third member of the Days of Roar pod team, Tigers radio voice, Bobby Scales.
I'd like to welcome Bobby Scales, radio analyst for the Detroit Tigers, to the Days of Roar podcast. Once again, Bobby's back. Thank you for coming on the pod.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
So you're out there on the West Coast, living the good life. How was life in Los Angeles for a few days? What was Dodger Stadium like on opening day? Kind of walk us through it all as the season's now underway.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. Obviously, the boys didn't get any wins in a 3-game series. You get swept out there. That kind of leaves not so good taste in your mouth. But, at the end of the day, there's some places that are just a little bit different. And Dodger Stadium is one of them. I am very much a historian of the game, and I think the history of our game is super important to understand. And they have done such a great job of preserving that building while adding modern touches and then putting their history on display. And I think it's fantastic. And then obviously they, with the celebration of winning the World Series last year, they brought Ice Cube in on day one and all the other things. It was the whole thing. I mean, the stadium's a vibe, man. It's like, it was funny on the third game of the series, Dan had TV, and Greg Gagne was my partner in the booth, and he's like, man, I feel like this place is a club, man. I'm like, yes, it's a building that's a club, and they got a baseball team in the middle of it. And that team's pretty good too. So the atmosphere was electric. It was fun to be a part of.
What was that like, by the way? I mean, you watched Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman at the top of that lineup. Can you even put into words and describe how difficult that is for pitchers, especially starting pitchers too, the second time through? Those 3 are so dangerous. Then you got Teoscar Hernandez there as well. They're so loaded.
There's no breaks. I mean, when I say there's no breaks, none. It's funny. I was going through the cards before we got on, and the first night, I mean, there's no breaks at all. I mean, you got to go all the way down to, I mean, honestly, the 8-hole really. And, with Rojas, who's not known for his glove, I mean, for his bat, but he had a decent offensive year last year. There's nowhere to go. So, I mean, even opening night, you go again, Andy Pages was hitting in a 9-hole and Miguel Rojas was hitting in the 8-hole. And then you fast forward to the third game of the series and Pages is hitting 5th behind Muncy. There's nowhere to go in that lineup. So you beat those guys, you earn it every single night. And you earn it offensively and you earn it, on the mound too, because 4 lefties, 4 righties in that bullpen, they're all filthy. Their starters don't stink either. So it's like, you better pack a lunch with that bunch. And you have to play perfect baseball. You have to execute offensively. You cannot give them extra outs. You cannot drop the baseball. So you got your hands full with that crew.
Seemed like every time they left the pitch middle, every time they made one of their few mistakes, just every mistake got taken advantage of for at least the first 24 innings of the series. It was pretty uncanny. I was telling Ev, it's not like I thought we played poorly. I mean, yeah, we didn't hit with runners in scoring position, but think how many base runners we had and just kept grinding every game. But somehow those guys just keep, going through Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman 4 times a game. It just seems like a recurring absolute Groundhog Day nightmare. It's just seems to suck.
Yeah, Mark, you said it. And to me, that was the difference in the series. If you want to get really into the weeds of what happened, they did not miss pitches middle of the plate, regardless of pitch type. They got something, whether it was early in the count, whether it was late in the count, after several foul balls or what have you. When a pitch, when one of the guys missed in the middle of the plate, it got shellacked. They just did not miss them. And so, yeah, and so here's the thing though, those, whether it be Flaherty or Skubal or even Olsen on the third day, when they executed the pitches the way they wanted to, they got outs, right? And they, even with the murderer's row of guys that they have in that lineup. But boy, you throw something over that middle third, it was heavy damage.
So the Tigers lost all 3 games, and we've already talked about the middle pitches. Those were obviously an issue. But Bobby, what were your other takeaways from the opening series against the Dodgers?
Well, I want to stay on the pitching. Yeah, there's a lot of pitches thrown in, not a lot. There were some pitches thrown in the middle, and you can't, it's the chicken or the egg. You have to live on the edges. And then if you get behind the count, then you got to, we're not going to just walk guys. So you got to challenge them with stuff. And obviously you want those challenge pitches to be more towards the corners, and they weren't, and they got walloped. That said, all 3 of those guys made pitches to get themselves out of innings. So the ability to make pitches to get weak contact, get a punch out occasionally, get some weak ground balls, some mishit pop-ups, it's there. So all in all, as bad as it seems, first of all, it's the first 3 games of the season. Like, let's just pump the brakes on everything, like full stop. But, it wasn't that bad. It was just a few missed locations, a few missed, opportunities where they didn't execute the way they wanted to. And of course, like, we just talked about, when those balls were in the middle of the plate, they got shellacked. So I think the pitching for me was a positive. It may sound crazy. I think the pitching was a positive because you saw guys who have been in that situation before be able to execute, get themselves out of certain situations by inducing weak contacts, getting a couple strikeouts in key situations. That was a good thing. Offensively, again, yes, the lack of production with runners in scoring position sticks out. I think the thing you have to remember, you have to do a deep dive into this thing is that, yes, the ending of those at bats weren't the way that the Tigers wanted them to go. But what I did see is a lot of good swings. There was a lot of good passes on some pitches that were in the middle of the plate that they executed on, and, the Tiger hitters just fouled off. And so, in 2 weeks, is that going to be, or in a week or so, is that going to be a thing? I don't think so, because the swing decisions were good. The passes at the baseball were good. We're talking timing. We're talking fractions of an inch, right? So I think all in all, there's no moral victories. I get all that. But all in all, Tigers are in a little bit better spot than most may think.
I didn't feel that bad about the series. Yeah, I've kind of felt it was like they had, let's load up the plain eyes the last 3 innings last night. But, look, culture, personality, style of play, everything that we have talked about hundreds of times, the 3 of us, especially the last 50 games of 2024, all of that was still intact as part of what these first 3 games are.
It's the same team. And that was encouraging to me, though, right? Like, it's the same exact team that we saw last year. And we even saw that early on in spring training. Like, the mojo was the same that it was last year when they went on their 31-11 run. So I think that carryover, that culture, it's also the same. I got no worries.
The swag was the same. Is that a good way to say it? Yeah.
I think, and I want to be careful using, and Evan, I'm not trying to pick on you here. I think the mojo implies that there's something like magical about it. It's not magical at all. That's culture. That's the way that this thing has been put together since the day that AJ got here. And then, since Scott got here, and that's what they do. This is how we're going to go about our business. We're going to stack good innings on good innings, good games on good games, good days on good days, weeks turn into months. And then that's what we do. And I think what you saw was the maturation of that down the stretch last year. So now it's like we take this and we continue to build on it going into this year. One thing I think too, you cannot discount, the Braves are out on the West Coast right now. They're struggling as well. That Florida to the West Coast to open a season between just literally the travel, the time zones, but also you got to remember too, all these games in spring training, not all of them, the majority of them start at 1:00. So you're up early, you're in the building at 7:30, you're on the field working by 8. Your formal practice with the team starts at like 9 or 10 o'clock. And then you go into a situation where you play a game at 1. Your body clock, the flipping of the body clock it's a lot. And none of the guys will use this as an excuse. AJ will not use this as an excuse. And I agree with that. But to say it's not a thing, it's a thing. And so when you combine all that together, yeah, I mean, not to mention the team on the other side is pretty good too. In evidence by they got these things called World Series rings on Friday night that confirmed that they're a pretty good ball club. So yeah, the boys are in a good spot. They'll be fine.
Bobby, you talk about culture. Tell us what you see day in, day out when it comes to the Tigers and the culture that's been set by AJ Hinch, Scott Harris, and really everybody that's been around for a few years now, because we're starting to see it year over year.
Well, I think one of the key things is when guys come up, they don't miss a beat. And the reason that guys come up and they don't miss a beat is because it happens at Triple-A. It happens in Toledo. It happens in Erie. It's happening in West Michigan and Lakeland. It's these guys getting used in different roles. Like you see Brant Herter come up. He may start. He may be in the bullpen. He may get the second. He may get the ninth. And, Tyler Holton, an insert name of pitcher here. Or, on the position player side, Andy Ibanez is always ready he sees a lefty get hot and pen, he's down the tunnel, he's getting warm already. Or, whoever that might be. That's part of how this team is run. The expectations were set and they're very clear in spring training. They were the same way last year. That's how Gabe Alvarez is going to run his Toledo team. This is a continuation of the culture that's set by AJ. It's continued by Ryan Garco and Shane Farrell. It goes down through the minor league managers and the hitting coaches and the pitching coaches, Doug Bockler and co down in Triple-A. This is what they do. And this is how this team is run. And this is how this team is run at the major league level. And I think the really cool thing for me is how when you get guys that come in who haven't been part of this, you get the Gio Urshela last year, you get Manuel Margot this year, whoever comes in, they see that and the buy-in is automatic. So that speaks to what's going on in that clubhouse. This is what we do. We've got stripes now from getting to the playoffs last year doing it, and it's going to work for us going forward.
Bobby, talk to me about Spencer Torkelson. What's going on right now, and is this sustainable throughout the season?
One, let's start with the second question first. I want to say yes. I want to believe that it is. What's going on with Tork? So we've talked a lot about the adjustments that he's made in the offseason. Obviously, he knew he had to get better. What happened last year was not a place where he wanted to be and not a place where the Tigers needed him to be, especially with how left-handed this team is. You needed a big bat, a right-handed bat that could hit in the middle of the order, that could break up some of that left-handedness. And he went to work, and you got to commend him. And it looks different, but it doesn't look drastically different to you're like, oh my gosh. The thing that I am most proud about him is he was told he's got to make that team. Okay. But he was also told he's got to change what he's doing. And this happens a lot, right? You go into off season, you make a change. I want to make a change. I want to do X, Y, Z. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to do that. The first time that ball flies out of somebody's hand in spring training and you don't get a hit or you punch out, the change is out the window. Let me go back to what I'm doing and I'm going to try to battle this way. He stayed committed to it. He got some results in spring training, hit a bunch of home runs. I think 4 or 5 home runs in spring training. Okay. Then it's spring training, but then you come out of the gate and you get Snell, you get Yamamoto, and you get Sasaki. And then you get that bullpen. And the at-bats he hit the homer. He had some really good at-bats. He had some really good takes, spitting on pitches he would have for sure swung at last year. It's early, but thus far, for it to be battle tested and thrown into the fire with that group of pitching he just saw. I don't know. And I'm going to be honest with you. And I was really going through this. I don't know that you're going to see a better group collectively of pitchers from you get Snell, Yamamoto, Sasaki struggled, fine. But that bullpen, 4 right, 4 left, they're all filthy. You may not see better pitching all year. You may see individual better pitchers, but collectively as a group, those guys are nasty, man. And for him to stay with it and get the results this early on in the season, it can't do anything but inspire confidence.
All right, Bob, I want to talk to you about something. It's a little in the weeds for a lot of people, but it's right up your alley, which is, look, you had thousands of professional at-bats. Discuss how small the difference is between being late and being on time. Because if I were to give Spencer Torkelson a nickname right now, I would give him the nickname On Time. He's just on time now. And it's so crucial to a hitter. And then I want you to explain, besides explaining the subtle, small, tiny difference between being on time and being late, because he was late for all of 2024, literally late. Okay. Now the swing isn't that much different. He's a little more athletic. He's got a little more athletic load, but he's getting the barrel of the bat to the right place. He's changed his approach a little bit with his process. He's using the right-hand side of second base kind of as a target place to try to hit the ball hard. We can get into all that, but explain how small that difference is and how likely it is you can keep that in your brain for long periods of time to be on time.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Mark. And I mean, you're talking milliseconds of difference between being on time and being late, right? So first of all, for me, when you're talking hitting, you talk about being on time. If any discussion that involves hitting doesn't involve the timing, I'm out. I don't want to talk about it because you're wrong, right? So, in today's hitting, okay, I'm trying to put this in a coherent fashion where it flows. So to answer your question, it's being on top. So I had one of my favorite hitting coaches I ever had, Chris Harrison. He actually is in, Metro Detroit, runs a sports academy. He was the hitting coach I had at the University of Michigan. And the most succinct way I've heard of him, of timing being described is every pitcher has a 1 and a 2. Every pitcher has to break his hands. Every pitcher gets to release. Breaking the hands is 1. Release is 2. Somewhere between 1 and 2, you have to load up and be ready to fire from that position before he gets to 2. Because if you're trying to load up and you're trying to stride and you're trying to get ready to hit when the pitcher's at 2 or after, you're beat, you're late, and it's over. You're not going to be able to recognize pitches. You're not going to be able to recognize spin. Then you're not going to be able to put your solid move and get your A swing off. Now, I want to take that back. In today's hitting, we've done so much work in the biomechanics area, right? So I would say pitching, because it's a closed loop skill, is probably 7 to 10 years ahead of hitting in terms of what they understand about the discipline. Closed loop is they have the ball, they control the outcome to a certain degree. Either they execute, they throw what they want, or they don't. An open loop skill is where you're dependent on variables, the variable being the ball, to try to execute the skill of hitting the baseball, right? So we know a lot more now because of some of the technologies out there about how the body moves and the movements that are needed and what moves that good hitters do. The part that some of this hitting discussion where I get lost and I get a little bit frustrated is people want to talk about his move, the move. But you can have the best movement on the planet, but if you're late and your timing is poor, it does not matter how good your move is. It is irrelevant, because the interesting thing about our bodies and the interesting things about our brains is that your body will adjust to get that barrel of the bat to where it believes the baseball is going to be in any manner it seems necessary. If you are late, you can't make the most efficient move towards the baseball. Your body's going to get the barrel there some kind of way. It might be long and loopy. It might be, you might have some kind of weird tilt. But the bottom line is, and let's land this plane and get it back to Torg, he is in a better position at the very beginning, a more athletic position at the beginning. He is on time. He's getting on time more often. And now, because he's on time more often and he's at a better spot, his move is more efficient to the baseball.
Bobby, what do you think about Ryan Kreidler in center field too? I mean, that was somebody that the Tigers sent out of spring training, optioned him to Triple-A Toledo, and then suddenly some injuries happen. He's back in the fold, and then he's starting in center field on opening day for the Tigers. We know he's an elite defender on the infield. We've seen him do that time and time again, especially at the shortstop position. Then he goes out there to center field and he makes a really impressive catch right off the bat in game one of the season. Just what are some of your thoughts about him out there, his actions? And do you feel like in the meantime, while we wait on Parker Meadows and Matt Vierling and Wenzel Perez, that a guy like Ryan Kreidler can do it in center field over a longer period of time?
First of all, if you are able to play a solid major league shortstop, you can do anything on the field. And catching is a different skill set. So I'm not going to say Ryan Kreidler can't catch. I hope we never find out, because if that's the case, a bunch of people have gotten hurt, and that's a bad thing, right? And we're in an emergency situation. But if you can play shortstop in the major leagues, you can play anywhere on the field. There is, like, we talked last year about Colts move to second, and now subsequently Colts move to first. There are nuances in the center field that are a little bit different than the corners. Generally speaking, he's a big athlete. He moves very well. And one thing that I commented to Dan Dickerson about is that he has a gait where his head doesn't move a lot side to side, and it doesn't bob up and down. Good outfielders, whether they play a corner, whether they play center field, have a gait where their head stays pretty steady and they're able to track the ball better, because as they're running, it's not, their eyes just aren't moving. Okay. And he just has that natural gait. So I think he can absolutely play center field and do so for an extended time defensively. I think the rub is going to be Ryan Kreidler needs to do something offensively to at least pull his weight. And look, even for him, it's been better. We saw a more improved judgment of the hitting zone and strike zone in spring training. And, I think we'll continue to see that. But to know with our pitching the way it is, to know that you have a lockdown defender in center field, that one that's more incapable of making all the routine plays. And then as he showed, night one, some of the spectacular plays, I think that's a plus. And listen, when opportunity knocks, somebody's going to come through that door, whether that somebody's in-house or that somebody's in Triple-A or that somebody that Scott and Jeff acquire via waivers or via trade or whatever. Somebody's got to walk through that door. And the thing that I like about Ryan Kreidler, he said, okay, he took the challenge, and now he got opening day start in center field.
Well, you mentioned somebody walking through that door. How about Manuel Margot? I mean, how do you see him kind of fitting in this season? The Tigers, they really like his right-handed bat against left-handed pitching. They went out and signed him and picked him up right before opening day. What do you think about Manuel Margot?
Great pickup. That's a great pickup. He's a pro. He's got stripes on his arm. There's no situation he's going to panic in. He gives the, the outfield. He gives AJ an option in corner outfield. There'll probably be more right than left, but, he gives him another option, and he can do some things. And it also helps shape how he can give DH days to different guys, right? So I think it was a perfect pickup. You look for those guys, kind of, Evan, we kind of talked about this offline, but there's somebody in the office monitoring the progress of everybody in major league camps who has outs, who has different, language in their contracts that may give them an opportunity to move to a different team for a major league opportunity. And so, for those guys to execute on that, it looked like he wasn't going to make that club. And so for them to execute that and sign him was a great addition, especially given some of the injury situations that we've been faced with.
Bobby, talk a little bit about, it seemed almost everybody, whether they had good outcomes or not, was tracking the ball well and had good swings, except for one guy who tracked the ball pretty well, but seemed like he was late on every swing, and that was Colt Keith. So Is that just a transition from Florida to major league pitching 5 times a night, or is it more than that?
Well, I think it's just a start that he'd rather not have. There's zero worry, because I think the thing for me, if you look back at Colt Keith's season, the evolution, and we talked about this in a couple times you guys had me on in the offseason, his evolution and maturation as a hitter was tremendous. And then we saw it again in spring training, like just absolutely scalding balls in that left center field gap. Now, and I talked about this on air, I believe it was game 2. Like, I don't want Colt Keith. Nobody wants Colt Keith to force balls to left field, inside out the balls to left field. But the approach to left field, the up the middle, the other way approach, the left center field, that approach is a mindset of being on time, seeing the baseball and let it travel to the proper hitting location, to the proper contact point. If it's a little bit off speed, get the barrel out and you hook it and you hit it to right field, you pull it. If it's a hanging off speed or it's a change up that's maybe up a little bit, you may pull it to right field. But you time that fastball up to hit it right back where it came from, or just to the left of to the right over the pitcher's right shoulder. You're going to be on everything he has to offer. And yeah, he saw these guys are really good. Their pitching staff's nasty. And Colt didn't have the best swings for a 3-game set. Cool. Now we're in Seattle. That's gone. There's no panic. And he's, I think, mature enough as a player, even though he's still a very young major league player. He's mature enough as a player to realize that. So yeah, it didn't look quite the way we want it to look, but there's no angst at all.
I need to get your take on Kerry Carpenter, another left-handed hitter, because when this guy's not in the opening day lineup against Dodgers left-hander Blake Snell, a lot of people on social media, they freak out. Like, why is Kerry Carpenter not in the lineup? Well, it's because they're facing a left-handed starter and a really nasty one in Blake Snell. Totally get it. Like, the Tigers are going to want a guy like Andy Ibanez or Manuel Margot in the lineup because they're better against left-handed pitchers. That's just how it works. But for Kerry Carpenter, he did get 3 plate appearances against lefties in the Dodgers series, went 0 for 2 with 1 strikeout and 1 sacrifice fly. I want to know, do you think the Tigers should give Kerry Carpenter more opportunities against lefties? Because I'm kind of back and forth on this when it comes to, you give him more opportunities to try to help him get better, right? Because you want to get him more experience maybe, but at the same time, you're sacrificing something in the process because then you're not using Andy Ibanez, you're not using Manuel Margot. So do you forfeit maybe like losing games by giving Kerry Carpenter opportunities to develop against left-handed pitchers? Or do you just continue to do what you're doing, play Andy Ibanez, play Manuel Margot, and Kerry Carpenter doesn't get as many opportunities against the lefties? Like, there seemingly is a balance there. And I'm curious what you think about that. And should they just kind of let him loose and give him opportunities against lefties? Or do you like what they're doing right now? Because what they're doing right now, it seems to be working more often than not.
Well, at the end of the day, AJ Hinch has got one job. That's win tonight's game, right? And so if there's a matchup that is better, that is more favorable to have Kerry on the bench and coming off the bench as a pinch hitter and using Andy Ibanez or now Manuel Margot, then he's got to do that, right? Do I think that Kerry Carpenter has an opportunity to become an everyday player and hit lefties too? I'm not going to bet against the guy because, the dude just waffles right-handed pitching. And he's only got, are we at 50 at-bats yet in his major league career off lefties? I don't know that we are. So,
but that's my point though, is like, do you give him more opportunities against lefties, which then takes away from some of the Andy Ibanez or Manuel Margot at-bats, which might hurt your team as a whole in the present, but maybe it helps Kerry Carpenter, improve against lefties in the long term? Like, is that a trade-off that you're willing to make or no?
That's a good question. And that's not for me to answer.
It's tough though, right? Because you'd love to see Kerry Carpenter develop into an everyday guy, but to develop, he has to get those opportunities.
I think at the end of the day, like what I said earlier, AJ Hinch got one job. He got to win tonight. And if there's a matchup that's more favorable, then he's got to put the best 9 out there to give you the best opportunity against the guy who's starting the game pitching, knowing what's in their bullpen too, right? Evan, it's a fair question. I'm really not trying to dodge it. It's a fair question. I think what the true answer to that is yes, you want to see. And I think it starts with left-handed pitchers that match up favorably with what Kerry does well. You can't just run him out there against anybody. And there's some guys, I'll say this, there's some guys that hit right-handed pitchers well that are right-handed and they kill lefties, but that right-handed pitcher they may get a start against is more of a vertical 4-seam curveball guy. If you've got a guy that's a 2-seam slider guy and that guy's swing doesn't match up well with that, even though he's had a little bit of success against right-handed pitching, you don't run him out there against that. So, I think finding the correct lefties to put in the game, that put Kerry in the game against is the key. So the answer is win the game tonight if you got a more favorable matchup. But if you have an opportunity against a lefty that profiles where Kerry and the things he does well, profiles better against, then you give him that opportunity.
Bobby, it's a great point. It speaks to how they play the game now is they're trying to put guys in the best position to succeed, giving Carpenter some at-bats against left-hand pitching. They have to be selective of what they're doing. It's kind of like making an investment to see if they can get some return, because the more at-bats he can take against lefties, the deeper in the game they can play the chess game because they don't have to take them out. So it early in the season, I guess it would seem like that would be a good idea. But the point you're making about who they allow that to happen against speaks to how complex the game is today, because they understand what degree of success he has versus certain types of left-handed pitching. So, all right, we're getting ready you're getting ready to go to Seattle. They also have some tremendous, especially starting pitching. Tell us what it's like what do you expect there? And talk a little bit about how long it takes you transitioning from spring training into the regular season before you start getting your timing squared away. You're facing way better pitching than you saw before. You're facing sequencing and you're facing really good pitching in these first 2 series. So what do we expect from the Tigers in Seattle? And talk a little bit about the transition from spring training.
Well, yeah, the transition can be tough. And for me, I will tell you, the thing that always got me about spring training going into the regular season was the fact that you go from playing almost all day games. Now, all of a sudden you're playing almost all night games. And that first week, 10 days, even 2 weeks, your body clock is on early, right? And it's just like, so, like I said, we mapped out the timeline early. So you're in the rack about 8, 9 o'clock because you got to get up. And so, you get up at 6:30, you're on the East Coast, right? Let's say you get up at 6 o'clock East Coast time, 6:30, whatever. You're in the building at 7:15, 7:30. You go about your day, you're back, play a game, whatever. You're back home at, let's call it 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and then you're back in the rack at 9 o'clock. Okay, great. Now all of a sudden you fly to the West Coast, you got a 7 o'clock game, which is really 10 o'clock, but you're getting up at 7 o'clock East Coast time, which is like 4 o'clock. And then you're trying to trick yourself into going back to sleep. And so it's just, you're off, man. Your circadian rhythm is off. Your body clock is off. You try to fool yourself into thinking it's not going to affect you. You're trying to take these random naps during the day. So yeah, like it's a thing. It's really a thing. So for me, it was always about, and I'm kind of weird too, because I don't sleep a ton and I'm an early riser period. So like it always took me, you fight through it because you got to play. You got a job to do and you got to get it. Nobody cares about the clock is off and this, that, and the other. Nobody cares about that. But at the end of the day, it used to take me about 7 to 10 days for sure to get out of 1 o'clock in East Coast time mode and get into night game mode. And so it's the transition is real. As far as Seattle, they got great pitching. You're going to see more guys with really good stuff. So, I think it's a benefit that they've seen the kind of stuff that they saw in LA to get ready for what they're going to see up in Seattle. So I don't think that, again, and the at-bats as a whole were good. They really were. And, you just want to execute a little bit better with men in scoring position. And if you can do that, I think they'll be happy with the results.
All right, Bobby, thank you so much for joining us on the Days of Roar podcast. You have become a regular on the pod, and it's a treat to listen to you on the radio. So I really hope all fans tune in during the upcoming series against the Mariners. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Everyone, that was Bobby Scales, radio analyst for the Detroit Tigers. We have more to discuss about the Tigers in the regular season, but first, let's take a break.
We're back. Boy, Bobby Scales, that was just so much fun, so much to learn, so many cool things that he shared with us. I hope everybody gets a chance to listen to it. Really, really informative. Beat writer Evan Petzold took a drive down I-75 to go visit some old friends. And when the car stopped, he was in Toledo to talk to Jace Jung, to Jay-Hen, to Jason Foley. So what did you find out when you were down in Toledo on Sunday, and how's everyone doing?
Yeah, first and foremost, hat tip to all three of those guys for being down to chat. I mean, they're all good dudes. I mean, they've always been good in the Tigers clubhouse, but all those guys, they got some pretty bad news recently that they were optioned to Triple-A Toledo. That's never easy to talk about, and all three of those guys are really open in talking about it. And so I want to tip the cap to all of them first for just being willing to do that. Jace Jung, was good talking to him, good catching up. It's interesting because there were concerns about his glove entering spring training, but leaving spring training, there were concerns about his bat. He's been working on some minor tweaks, but more importantly, Jace Jung is focused on returning to his original approach at the plate, which is dominating the strike zone and having quality at-bats. In spring training, he felt like he was focused on specific adjustments in search of trying to barrel the ball more often. And those adjustments were adjustments that the Tigers wanted him to make. So while he focused on those things to try to improve his batted ball data in a small sample in hopes of making the team, he felt like he lost the best version of himself at the plate, which is just getting on base and being a really tough out. So he felt devastated when the Tigers optioned him to Triple-A, which is understandable, but he was really positive. He's maintained a good attitude about everything. He knows what he needs to do at the plate, and that's quality at bats. And then from there, he's going to be ready to answer the call. Whenever the Tigers pick up the phone, dial his number and say, hey, we want you up here, Jace Jung's going to be ready to go. But I like where his mindset is at. It sounds like he knows exactly what he wants to do, focusing on putting together as many quality at-bats as possible and then letting the rest take care of itself. I mean, the big thing the Tigers were concerned with in spring training was that he wasn't barreling the ball enough, and they made that clear to him. And then he went and he tried to do specific things to change his swing, to try to barrel the ball more. And it was just like a rabbit hole that ended up putting him in a worse spot than he was before. He said he felt like his swing was pretty good all spring. He just wasn't barreling the ball. And it was such a small sample. He felt like he started to kind of search for some things that maybe he shouldn't have, and, went down some rabbit holes that he shouldn't have. But now he is back to a spot where he's getting back to who he is as a hitter. As for Justyn-Henry Malloy, I feel the worst for J-Hen because he did not do anything to get optioned to Triple-A Toledo. He was just the odd man out. He hit over 300 in spring training. He looked really good at first base on defense, which I did not see coming. That was really impressive. He even hit a home run in the final exhibition game in San Francisco. But the Tigers sent him down to Toledo for two reasons. Spencer Torkelson is hitting the ball better than anyone else on the team. And then when it really came down to it, the Tigers picked Ryan Kreidler's defense in center field over Justyn-Henry Malloy's offense because the Tigers are trying to protect their pitching staff with the best defense possible. And that's exactly what the Tigers told us reporters. That's exactly what the Tigers told J-Hen. It sucks, but it's the reality of the situation. As for what's next, he's just going to keep doing his thing in Triple-A Toledo. He's not making any adjustments or doing anything different. Like, he's just going to do what he does, which is staying dangerous at the plate. So he's going to be on the attack and hunting pitches that he can crush, all while trying to dominate the strike zone to draw walks. It seems like he has a good feel for doing both of those things, driving the ball and drawing walks. He calls it being dangerous. He says he learned it in the postseason last year. We'll see when the Tigers make that call to him. And then Jason Foley. Look, both Jace Jung and Justyn-Henry Malloy were in pretty good spirits, but I could tell Jason Foley was still pretty upset about the fact that the Tigers demoted him to Triple-A Toledo. And I get it. Like, he tied for 5th in the American League and 9th in MLB with 28 saves last season. He had a 3.18 ERA in 199 games in 2022, 2023, in 2024. This guy is a big league pitcher. Here's what Foley said, quote, "I was pretty surprised. I think I'm self-aware enough to realize I didn't pitch my best baseball in spring training. I just thought the last 3 years, my track record would have maybe superseded a couple of shaky outings in spring training," end quote. That's Jason Foley on being demoted. I think that's a fair way of looking at things, but Foley met with AJ Hinch and Chris Fetter. They expressed concerns that changes in the movement patterns of his mechanics led to lower velocity and less command during spring training. Those are things the Tigers want Foley to fix in Triple-A before he returns to the big leagues. He acknowledged the decrease in velocity, but doesn't really think that he struggled with command in spring. After all, he didn't walk anybody. It was 0 walks and 10 strikeouts in 7 1/3 innings in camp, but he had a 6.14 ERA. As for what he's doing in Triple-A, he pitched in Saturday's game for the Mud Hens. He retired all 3 batters in the 7th inning. He threw all 7 of his pitches for strikes. He also struck out Will Brennan, a left-handed hitter, on 3 pitches, all swing strikes, 97.4 mile an hour sinker, 90.3 mile an hour splitter, and 90.2 mile an hour splitter. Yes, he calls it a splitter, not a changeup. That's a fascinating development. Even better, his sinker averaged 96.8 miles an hour, so pretty close to 97 miles an hour. That was up like 1.5 miles an hour from spring training. That's a positive. His velocity is up from spring training, probably just a result of the game action. The Tigers picked Brendan Hanafy over Jason Foley. Whenever it's time for them to call up a reliever, as long as Jason Foley is pitching well, he probably deserves to be first in line. I mean, look, again, it's Jason Foley. He ranked tied for 5th in the AL in saves last season. But all 3 of those guys, they're in Toledo right now. They're working to get back to the big leagues. Jace Jung, J-Hen, both those guys in pretty good spirits. Jason Foley still fighting it a little bit, but he seems to be getting over the disappointment. That's how those 3 are doing. That's a quick recap from my trip to Toledo.
Pretty encouraging when you think of having depth of that quality waiting to be recalled from Toledo. Way too many years, all 3 of those guys, regardless of how they performed in spring training, would have been on the opening day roster. We also, have neglected to discuss Andrew Chafin, but I think we all understand what's up with Andrew Chafin. He also needs to get his velocity up. So there's a ridiculous amount of depth at Toledo. I'm sure all these guys will be on the roster at some point in time in the next 3 to 6 weeks, if not sooner. Injuries are a fact of life in Major League Sports, and it's just good to know that the Tigers have great depth. I mean, especially Jace Jung, if he could catch fire and seem to be consistent, I don't think they could wait to get him back in the lineup at third base. That would really be probably a pretty decent upgrade. All right, let's discuss what we got coming up for the rest of the week. We got 3 games in Seattle. We have a day off, and then we have 3 with the White Sox for opening day festivities. Give me a fast rundown on what your thoughts are about that.
Monday, Jackson Jobe versus Emerson Hancock. Tuesday, Casey Mize versus Logan Gilbert. Wednesday, Tarek Skubal versus Luis Castillo. Off day Thursday. Friday, Jack Flaherty is lined up to start the home opener against the Chicago White Sox at Comerica Park in Detroit. But Mark, I'm going to turn this back around to you because that's what we have coming this week. I want to know what you think about Jackson Jobe, because Jackson Jobe gets to make the first start of his MLB career Monday against the Seattle Mariners. What are your thoughts? What are you looking for? What are your expectations? We saw him have these spurts of greatness, if you will, in spring training. We also saw him struggle at times. We've seen Tarek Skubal. We've seen Jack Flaherty. We've seen Reese Olson. Now we're about to see Jackson Jobe. What are some of your thoughts on the top pitching prospect in baseball making the first start of his MLB career?
All right, I'm going to make this short and sweet. When we got introduced to Jackson Jobe, with all kinds of media or seeing little flashes of him, finally got to see him last spring training, threw 100. Everybody was so excited. He threw 100. He had such a great fastball. And we saw him again at the end of the year, and then we saw him in the playoffs. Now we've seen him throughout spring training. You know what by far the most impressive part of Jackson Jobe is, besides a really humble bulldog demeanor and powering through things? His arsenal of secondary pitches, just pretty unbelievable if you've been paying attention. You know what the weakest part of Jackson Jobe's game that needs to step up, that'll transfer, his production level from a little bit of a wild card to dominant? Fastball command. Jackson Jobe needs better fastball command. He also needs to find, a little bit of a tweak, maybe whether it's an arm slot or just understanding where he can locate his fastball to get some swings and misses and help it tunnel with just some extraordinary secondary stuff. So my answer about Jackson Jobe is he reminds me a lot of Justin Verlander. Not quite the same quality of fastball. In 2006, it wasn't like Justin Verlander was Justin Verlander then, even though he was Rookie of the Year. He was not a huge strikeout pitcher then. He was learning how to be a strikeout pitcher. And in some ways, Jackson Jobe reminds me quite a bit, both because of the arsenal and just, in style. So excited to see what he can do. Seattle's a really good place to pitch. Mistakes often do not end up in the seats in Seattle. It's like playing in the Grand Canyon. So what's your thoughts about that?
No, I'm just looking forward to seeing what this guy is going to do in a longer spurt in the regular season. We only saw him come out of the bullpen last year. So I'm just fascinated to see what he looks like, how he sequences. I mean, that's the big thing that I'm looking for is the sequencing of his pitches. How does he keep hitters off balance? How is he able to deceive them in any way possible? Because again, he's got to protect the fastball, but also he's got to protect mistakes too, because he's going to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It happens. And so, can you sequence in a way in which you protect yourself from those mistakes? I think there's a way in which Jackson Jobe can do that. And hopefully they're able to get that done. And then as for everything else, I mean, the Tigers are 0-3 to start the season. Look, we have more than 98% of the season remaining. So what happens Monday doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Yes, every game does matter. I'm not trying to, take away from that. But if the Tigers lose on Monday, I'm not going to hit the panic button and say that they're doomed. But I would say it would feel really nice to get that win and not be 0-4. To be 1-3 would feel really good. And I know that it's not all built on feelings. We got to talk about things built on logic, right? Because it's not all about feelings, but it would feel good to be 1-3 as opposed to 0-4. And that starts with Jackson Jobe on Monday. I'm really excited.
All right, it's time to get out of here. I want to remind everyone to please like, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and especially YouTube. You can always find us embedded in every Evan Petzold article in the free. You'll also see some video stuff that we put up there of Ev and I and whatever guest we have. Want to remind everybody you can find us both on X at Evan Petzold, or you can find me at Sports5176 at Days of War Pod. You want to follow us? We're pretty fun to follow during the game, and you won't miss too much. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, our producer, the Magic Man, Robin Chan, my amazing, amazing grandsons, love ya, and the spectacular soon-to-be Mama Petzold, Savannah Petzold, wishing you the best of luck, thinking of you this week, love you, and until next week, when Evan is a daddy, peace.